Hi, how you doing? Let's get this out of the way right at the very beginning. This is a subject that people seem to feel very strongly about one way or the other, and because of that, I'm expecting that a few of you will be hitting the comment section pretty hard. And that's great. One of the things I love the most about YouTube is the debate we get to have in the comments, and the sense of community we've built here over the last decade. However, in my opinion, one of the most important things that martial arts teaches us is respect. So please try and keep it polite and respectful. That being said, feel free to disagree with me. So let's talk about grappling for self-defense. We're going to have to start by defining some of the terminology we're going to use in this video if we're going to stand any chance of coming to a reasonable conclusion. So we'll start by looking at what exactly we mean by self-defense. As far as I'm concerned, any self-defense or self-protection training we do has to have the primary goal of getting us out of a potentially life-threatening situation. Whether that's simply an increased awareness of what's going on around you that lets you notice a situation that has the potential to become violent so you can walk away before it happens, or at the opposite end of the spectrum, the ability to use violence to end an altercation in the fastest possible way. The goal should always be to get you away from the potential danger. If getting you away isn't what you're training for, then I'd argue that in reality you aren't training to protect yourself, but to beat up muggers. And while Death Wish was an iconic film, I don't think we should be using it as a model for modern life. Also, while we're defining terminology, I'm using the word grappling to refer to any form of fighting that involves one or other of the people involved taking hold of the other. Whenever this subject crops up, one of the first things people say is that grappling is useless for self-defense, going to the ground is pointless and dangerous, and that grappling arts are no good for self-defense. However, this, to me at least, exposes one of the most common myths about real-world violent encounters. And that is the all-pervasive idea that you can simply choose not to go to the ground. We all know that being on the ground puts you in a significantly worse position than standing. If your goal is to get away, that's harder to do from the floor. If you're trying to move around to keep your attacker or attackers at distance, or just in view, that's far easier to do when standing. Having a solid surface behind you on the ground significantly limits your options when it comes to actual fighting techniques as well, which is incidentally why we prefer mount to guard. But knowing all of this doesn't make it possible to avoid it. The assumption that you simply won't do it because you don't want to is wishful thinking of the most dangerous sort. The reality of the situation is that you don't get to choose if you're going to be attacked. You don't get to select your attackers, you don't get to pick what they're able to do, and you don't get to decide in advance how the scenario is going to play out. A little while ago I did a reaction video of a couple of relative beginners fighting, and one of them tried what I described at the time as possibly the worst takedown I'd ever seen. And yet it still worked, because his opponent had even less skill at grappling. He didn't want to go to the ground. He had no idea what to do when he was down there, and yet there he was, on the ground, losing the fight. There's another fairly common misconception among the martial arts community, and that's that whatever it is that they do will work really well against a grappler. If what you do isn't grappling, then it won't. In the same way that when you put a Tai Chi practitioner up against an MMA fighter, the outcome's fairly predictable. The same way that if you put an Aikido black belt in a boxing ring with a half-decent boxer, we all know what's going to happen. But the Dunning-Kruger effect is a real thing, which is why that Tai Chi guy accepted the fight in the first place. It's why the Aikido black belt is convinced they can actually fight, and why people who think that they will simply not go to the ground are absolutely, dangerously wrong. The fact is that if somebody starts acting aggressively towards me on the street, I can walk away. If somebody fronts up and starts trying to punch or kick me, I can run away. If someone gets hold of me, or even worse, takes me to the ground and gets a top position, I can't simply walk away, unless I understand enough grappling to be able to counter what they're doing. There are a few phases that every new grappler goes through when they start training. The first is having their initial confidence thoroughly destroyed. Whether they're the type of person who's pretty passive and just gets smashed, or the sort of person who does what the BJJ community so nicely calls spazzing out, they learn very quickly that almost nothing they do helps at all. That their instincts are completely wrong and actually deeply unhelpful. This is a really hard lesson to learn, and for a lot of people, they find it so unpleasant that they simply never come back. But those that stick with it start to learn a few basic skills. They begin to recognize positions, they begin to see opportunities for techniques, and possibly, most importantly, they get accustomed to being in deeply uncomfortable positions. They still lose most of the time, and that can be incredibly disheartening, but without realizing it, they're becoming better at grappling. There's a phrase I love, and that is that the rising tide floats all the boats together. Essentially, it means that in your club, as you improve, all the people you train with in your club also improve. And so using your sparring with them to judge your progress gives you a very false sense of what you can do and what you know. When another new person comes along, you realize that in fact you do know stuff. You can take them down. You can control the position. If they try to take you down, you can prevent it. If you're underneath, you can sweep them and reverse position. It's taken you a while, but you now have a decent understanding of the nature of grappling, and while you still have a long way to go to master it, you've learned the fundamental principle that the only way to defeat somebody grappling with you is also to be able to grapple. However, this isn't all of it. There's another very common misconception about grappling, and that's that it's so confined by rules that you'd simply fight dirty and win. You'd bite them. You'd tear their balls off. You'd gouge their eyes. That kind of thing. In reality, you wouldn't. Because you wouldn't be able to. It's really easy to look at a standard straight armbar where the attacker's leg is over the face of their opponent and think to yourself that you just bite their leg and they'd let go. Only when you're in that situation, even in training, when you know full well your partner isn't actually trying to break your arm, you still struggle to think of anything other than what's happening to your arm. It hurts. Quite a lot. And from personal experience, the feeling of something going pop in your elbow when you know full well the technique isn't even fully on is distracting at best. Even if you manage to have the focus to bite their leg, do you honestly think they'll just stop? Or will they push the hips up, moving their leg out of your reach and also, incidentally, snapping your arm at the same time? Your dirty fighting won't work. Your brilliant striking won't work. If striking was a good way to prevent submissions, do you think we'd see so many submissions in MMA competition where striking's allowed? The reality of the situation is that the thing that beats grappling is better grappling. So no, you don't want to go to the ground in a self-defense scenario. It's a ridiculously dangerous situation to find yourself in. And we haven't even begun to mention multiple attackers, helpful bystanders attacking the wrong person, or the added inconvenience of the stuff that's on the ground with you. But not wanting to go to the ground isn't enough. You need to be able to stuff a takedown, defend a throw, and if that fails, you need to have a basic understanding of what positions there are on the ground and how to get from the one you're in to a less dangerous one. "I'd just stand up," is another common thing people say. Would you? Would you really? Do you honestly think it's that simple? Do you think that no one ever thought of that before? Standing up when someone's trying to stop you is actually pretty hard. It's definitely something to practice if you don't already. When I trained with Billy Robinson, we spent the best part of an hour learning his surprisingly specific way of standing up. It's not easy. And if you're up against more than one person, I doubt even his method would work. So no, don't go to the ground, and if you do inadvertently find yourself there, get up as fast as you can. And if you can't get up, disable your opponent as quickly and effectively as you possibly can. But if you think you can do any of that without learning how to grapple, well, you're a fool. So now, over to you. What do you think? Am I right? Or have I completely missed the actual point? Stick something in the comments, but remember what we said at the beginning, right? If you've enjoyed this video, then the chances are you'll enjoy my older videos, and the ones I'll be making in the future. Please consider subscribing if that's the case. And if you'd like to support the channel directly, you can do that by clicking on the thanks button below this video, or by signing up at Patreon. Either way, thanks very much for watching. I hope you have a great day. Fight team!